All right, everybody, welcome to the Middle Ground Mic. Today we got a great episode coming for you. We've got Sheriff Chris Swanson, who's running for governor of Michigan. Everybody, especially in Michigan, you should know him, if not nationwide. He really embodies what we value here: balance and a real thought process. He's led Flint through a lot of situations, the protests, the water crisis. Now he's, protect, serve, unify. That's his mantra going into this race. And here's why it matters. Our state's at a crossroads. People are burnt out on outrage politics. They are burnt out. And, Chris is a breath of fresh air and definitely should be, to me, with how he's going, that this is what we need in our state. Chris, I appreciate you coming on the show. Introduce yourself a little bit. Tell the viewers who you are.
Appreciate it, brother. And as I said off camera, thank you for using your time and talent to message. And you're a message bearer to people that I may never cross paths with, but today they're going to know who I am. So I just appreciate it. To all your viewers out there that are loyal to Joe and building his platform for 100 episodes, it wouldn't happen without you. So this is why I love people, and when I say good people find good people, here's an example. So as the sheriff of Genesee County, which is Flint, like you mentioned, I've been here for 33 years on the job. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan, Flint since 1997 in public health for 27 years. I have businesses. My wife is the CEO of our company. On top of that, I love people, man. I got two grown sons that are both married, and they both just have the heart of serving people. But, I'm a working class dude, and my whole life has just been taking chaos and making order out of it. And we might even get into it, but I became a paramedic when I was 20 years old after seeing a violent death, a shooting when I was 18. And I thought, we're going to take care of people. My whole life has been just serving people, leading people, and bringing hope to people. And that's what we're going to talk about today in your show.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously, Michigan, we're a big blue collar state. I mean, I think pretty much I call him the savior of sports in Michigan, Dan Campbell. I mean, he's really reset everything in this state. Gosh, if that guy fought, you get elected, he could easily, if he wins a Super Bowl title, he could win anything he wants in this state, with
Listen, man,
ease.
I'm going to have David send you a text. A year ago, there was a paper that so cool. Somebody called in and said, Sheriff Swanson's the Dan Campbell of law enforcement. And there's my picture. I'm like, that's legit. Yeah.
Yes. Gosh, what a breath of fresh air he was for the Lions.
For sure.
I used to be a season ticket holder for 15 years. So,
you were there for the 0-16.
Yes, that was.
Those days are gone, Joe.
I know, it's actually like I can watch a game now and not know by halftime that we're already going to lose.
Yes.
And I love my Lions, man. But yeah, let's dig into it a little bit. Your campaign slogan, right, is protect, serve, unify. It's caught a lot of attention among everybody, right? Because, especially with, especially with the Floyd protests, right, there became that little bit of mistrust between the public perception and the law enforcement community. And, you're battling that. Like what you did really set a tone for the state. We really bucked the trend in terms of the craziness. Walk us through, you get elected governor. What is that? What do those first days look like for you?
I think it's important, if I can, to lay some more foundation on that protest. It was beyond law enforcement and community. It was between the white and the black community. It's between different generations. When George Floyd was murdered by somebody who looked like me in a uniform that I have been wearing my whole life, or my dad and my grandfather, both Detroit police officers, that's not who we are. And that's not what law enforcement is. So when I saw the video like everybody else did, and I was thinking, how do you have a grown man begging for his life? Because in our profession, when the cuffs are on, the fight is over. And that guy stood there like he was proud on the back of an individual who was begging for his mom and then lost his life. And that's what triggered all of this, what I call righteous anger, even on our side. So fast forward, I had been appointed sheriff. I took office that January. COVID hit 3 weeks later. We just came through the first round. Everybody out there knows what happened. And then when the Floyd thing happened, we had a protest scheduled on May 30th, 2020. And so coming from history, many times that's repeated as to how to handle what you do now. And that wasn't the case. Now, I have to confess that we planned on, should this go sideways, we can take 1,000 people to jail, 1,000 flex cuffs, and we had all of the what I would call the instruments to resist and make sure that we maintain in a forceful way the community. But the second I saw the people, for the sake of time, they got there at 5. They marched to the west, the east. They came back. By 7:15, we were outnumbered 50-1. And then when they went towards the police department, which was our incident command, that's when the whole vibe changed, Joe. And we knew there was going to be bloodshed. So the line formed in front of the police department, much like you're talking about today, division. It was us against them, and that was the mentality. But as I walked up, I thought to myself, like, I cannot believe this is happening. There's got to be a better way. And I would say life is like a cup, and you are that cup, and you add in and you allow other people to add in. And when your cup gets bumped, that's what you are when your metal is tested. And so I thought there's got to be a better way because somebody's going to get killed here. And I looked in the crowd, and there was open carry. You had young and old, white, black on one side. You had rookie cops and veteran cops, and some people wanted to engage. Some people were scared to death. It was just chaos. Well, when I broke the line by taking my helmet off, I went there for one reason, and that was to engage with a guy whose name is Jeff Hawkins. He was a black pastor from the community, and I knew that he was a friend. And I said, man, I'm coming for you. I picked up my phone. I walked in. I gave him a hug. There was an organizer of the protest that came over. I didn't give him a chance to even say hello. I said, hey, man, I said, that's not who we are. I said, these cops are here to help you. I said, you tell us what we need to do. And he says, well, get their attention and you tell them. And so this crowd formed, and everybody got their phone out. And I'm telling you, go back to the video. I encourage your listeners and viewers to watch it because I get encouraged by it when I get discouraged about division, because nobody can tell me it can't be unified. I said, listen, that guy in Minneapolis isn't who we are. I said, these cops are here to help you. That cop over there gives hugs. We got women, children, we got dogs. Let's turn this into a parade, not a protest, with the sole purpose of trying to de-escalate. That's it. Just your words talk people down. And when I asked the question, and this is why running for governor and the things that we're talking about is my driving force. People closest to the problem know the answer. Just ask them. And so when I said, what do you need us to do? And they started chanting before I even completed the sentence, walk with us, walk with us. We were talking about the lions. Chanting for the lions comes up from your lungs. Chanting from pain comes from your diaphragm. And this pain, and they started chanting. 3 seconds, I take a step back, I'm doing a calculation. It's all sympathetic response. I'm like, let's walk. And I said, boom, let's walk. I said, we'll walk all night. And instantly hate turned to hope. And we started walking back. I didn't realize the crowd continued to grow. By the time I got back to the Target parking lot, the parking lot was full of people who were watching it live. And then when I spoke on that light pole and I made a declaration that I can't do everything. I can't bring George Floyd back from the dead. I can't fix everything this night, but I'm going to do my part. And that's where the protect, serve, and unify piece came from. Because law enforcement's always been protect and serve. But it's that unify tenet that we added to all my patrol cars on the rug in front of our office. And to your point, that's why people are frustrated, because division it's pessimistic. There's no hope. Where unity is not to be confused with uniformity or compliance or weakness. No, unity is our strength. Unity and diversity is our power. I want to know perspectives. And that's why on that day, it set a tone. This is who I am, and this is what I want to continue to do on a greater scale.
Yeah, no, and that's perfect. I mean, that goes, I believe the last time I looked, I mean, Lord knows politics change every day, but I believe independent voters are right around 40% right now. Potential voters identify right around 40% that identify, I would say, as independent. And for anybody who doesn't know, that means, you could go to one side or the other depending on what it is. And, I think that's, I won't say necessarily important, but I think it's important that people are starting to see that, right? And I think that comes from what we were just talking about, the division, where people are just like they're put off, right? People formed party lines a long time ago because even if they identified as one side or the other, they could respect somebody on the other side. Whereas now you don't have that, so you tend to hear more of the extremes, like in certain situations, like the protests, and you somehow buck the trend. You somehow broke that because a lot of the times people who preach unity, hey, let's do this in the right way, they get buried. Nobody wants to hear them.
But tell you this too, if those there on that scene in May of 2020 didn't see it in my heart, they thought it was just words, we would not be talking about this. that people will see and they can read, are you serious about protecting, serving, and unifying? Like, let me see. And I've said on many platforms, not only listen to what I say, but watch what I do. And so when we launched Ignite, our education model in the jail in September of 2020 to educate inmates to never come back to jail, give them jobs and fair housing and a driver's license and ID and all the, when you set people up never to come back to jail, this means they're not breaking the law. That means they're not
Right.
breaking businesses, they're not re-addicting, they're not reoffending. You're helping with the mental health, turn into a stable family reunification. There's so many benefits. Next Tuesday, the 17th of November, I'll have my 38th commencement of Ignite graduates. We've dropped the jail count by 100. It's been studied by some of the biggest researchers in the world, Harvard, Brown, and Michigan, Stanford. And I say that because you're right. Doing the right thing is not the easy thing, but at the end of the day, it's the right thing. And when people see that and individual leaders
Yes.
pop up, moments with momentum create the movements.
Yeah, and it's not easy, and it takes somebody with strong will to do what you're doing. I mean, you can just look at some people who I don't want to say like they take advantage of opportunity, and something that like really came out per se that's not Michigan based, but that really stood out to me. And I'm not necessarily a fan of hers, but Major Taylor Greene, she came out recently and said she challenged her own party. She said, "Hey, what are we doing about healthcare? I hear about it, but I'm not seeing anything about it." And I'm not a big fan of hers, but I was like, man, finally somebody that came out and said, this is a problem. I'm not happy with it. And I'm not necessarily making anything like about her, but like what you're doing, that exemplifies, bucking the trend. We're just not, not towing the line. Some of our slogans in some episodes are get rid of the echo chambers. Like everybody's got to get rid of echo chambers and be willing to talk to each other. I tell people all the time, so I work in business and I tell people, I'm like, if you can't have a tough conversation with someone, you've already failed. And that's, like I tell people like on a personal level, I'd rather have somebody that's willing to sit there, look me in the face and say, bleep you, but let's figure this out. I prefer that level of honesty. I don't need somebody to tell me what I want to hear because I could find anybody to do that, and people look at me and they're like, what? They're like, well, that's kind of rude. I'm like, no, that to me, that's important because that tells you what's coming from their heart.
Encourage people when it comes, especially to politics, is don't argue with the person, argue with the point, the
Yes.
policy. Because if the
Yes.
person, regardless of who they are, comes out with something that helps people, then where does it matter where the source came from? I mean, we
Yes.
see that on a lot of issues. I should be the last person for an entire community who is angry with white policing in 2020 to get people to walk with me. And not only that day, we had 40 protests that whole summer throughout Genesee County, small, medium, and larges. Nobody got injured, nobody got arrested. That moment reached 3.2 billion people. So the messenger is irrelevant. What is the message they're trying to articulate? And if this makes sense, then let's all join together. And that's where that protect, serve, and unify. Protect what means the most to people, serve like a leader is supposed to serve, and bring people together, even that may have such a divide or they don't. I mean, there's people listening right now that can't have, like you said, you don't have friends now because of a certain issue or a podcast that you did. Like, where have we come where we can't agree to disagree and still be friends? Now, that doesn't
Right.
mean it will be the same as what it used to be, but this is the power of the people, not policy, not a party.
Yeah, and it's just a shame, like so lessons from Genesee County, right? And then we look at, you talked about your dad and grandfather being Detroit cops, before we get into that, man, I love where Detroit has come. I was born and raised to I was about 10 years old, we moved out of the city. It man, it has been so freaking awesome to see this city on a comeback. And I tell people if you haven't lived here, and I'm not knocking anybody who hasn't, but it is such a like a it is so huge for the state that, Rick Snyder had said, a lot of controversial things to him. But the one thing that I really love that he had said was to have a strong Michigan, Detroit's got to be strong. And I was like, that was the real first governor I'd heard in a long time say something like, because when people from around the world, around the country think of Michigan, they don't think of Lansing, they don't think of any other city, they say Detroit. And what's happening there, but that's going to filter into other cities in the state as we're on the rebound, like all the other cities got built up after Detroit became a stronghold, 100 years ago. So I love the fact that, that's coming in. What you've done, Detroit, what is his name? Mike Duggan, he kind of did something similar with being peaceful. Yours to me was a lot more bold than what he had
Yeah,
done.
and it also is because I come from the platform of a sheriff.
Yes.
So I think people that are listening right now, there's still a trust factor with a elected sheriff, even law enforcement. The whole defund the police. It was political malpractice to even suggest that because, as I said on that day and now, we don't need to defund the police. We need to professionalize policing. And if we can't train it out, discipline it out, then we need to cut it out. And police leaders need to be the one that are the spearhead of that. People love the police, but it's our job to give them a reason why every single day. So the fact that I'm a sheriff allows people to think, wait a second, he's an elected official of a party, but he takes care of everybody. That's what you're supposed to do.
Right. No, for sure. And some of what you have talked about is about a help center of Lansing, right? And that kind of plays into this, because state services do feel like a maze. I mean, you know, I'm not gonna lie, there's been things where, I've got an autistic son. Okay, he's 7. But he has defied the expectations. Everything they told us when he was 4 years old, I challenged it. I said, I said, I have no idea where he's gonna be, but I'm not gonna subscribe to that's where he's gonna be his whole life. And where that comes into that is okay, hey, I'm looking for how do I help my son, right? Like what state? And by God, if there wasn't Google, you'd have no idea what to do. So how does that, how does the help center of Lansing look for you?
It's modeled after the Genesee County Sheriff's Office, whose nickname is the Ark. It's a place
Us?
for people to
Yeah,
go to get refuge and to get help. That's why we do so many more things outside of law enforcement. And I've been intentional on that, not because of
right.
a reason, because I want people to look back and say, wait, if he's talking about literacy going from 44 to 34, does he really mean it? Well, for the last 4 years, we've done the Sheriff Swanson Pizza Party Extravaganza for March, which is reading month, to have every elementary school in Genesee County compete for a reading contest. Yes, I'm serious about literacy. I come from
Yeah.
a teaching background. Yes, I know about literacy. When you talk about Deps and Dogs during the Back to the Bricks, where we celebrate families on the front lawn of the sheriff's office, when you're working with Dana Nessel on the first statewide expungement fair, where 700 people signed up to get their lives back in a record clear, and 1,440 people showed. When you talk about second chances and giving people another opportunity that may have made a bad mistake, because all of us have been touched by the justice system, whether it's a family member or somebody we know that's made
Yeah.
a bad decision or addictions or mental illness. When you talk about people that I have given a second chance because we've all been given one ourselves, those are the what I call check marks to say he really is serious about what he was doing. So that help center we're talking about, if you need help in this county, come to the sheriff's office and I'll take you and put you in the right direction.
Heck
In
yeah.
the same thing. The Department of Innovation for small businesses, from idea to implementation. If we do that just for small businesses, there's 900,000 already established. What about the other 100,000 ideas that just die in the vine because they don't know how to take it down the line? You're going to call that department and we're going to have people walk and coach you along. If we can keep your business successful and in Michigan, everybody wins. If we do that 1,000 times a year and 100 of them become a multi-million dollar success and 10 of them go IPO, they're staying in Michigan. That's the long-term plan beyond a governor's
Yes.
term, but that's what's going to keep Michigan thriving. And of course, how do you support families that are dealing with an autistic child? We've got people that are, severely disabled children with the insurance laws change. You have people that have, closed head injuries that have lost their funding, and family members have had to quit their jobs to be that caregiver. They didn't go to school for that. They're learning on the job. This is where you have to have a heart of a leader. And this is why an executive leader at that level, no disrespect to the current administration, but I know what's capable and I know I'm able to do it. And my heart is right to do exactly what you just said. Help people.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. The government is to serve the people and also, for the people to serve the government, but like JFK said, not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. But back then, people felt a purpose to serve their country where people don't feel that purpose anymore. And your passion, to me, what you do gives people that purpose, right? They can push that purpose. And you know, one thing that I kind of look at from the 80s to like what now, right? Like there's this big Americana, like we're proud. people felt a sense of purpose in their country. People feel disillusioned right now, and that's like your passion. That's what it needs. Everybody should have that level of passion,
Thanks, man.
you know.
I got to tell you,
And so,
one of my biggest critiques is people, they come to me all the time, like, and they'll say, I have no friend who knows me. Is he always like that? Is this really him? Is he on when the cameras are on? I promise you, this is who I am all the time. You can ask my second grade
heck yeah.
teacher. There's kids out there that couldn't sit still and always talked, but still happy. That's us. Yes, this is
Hey,
always, yeah.
and that's authenticity. That's what it's all about. People can read through fake these days, at least with their gut feeling.
Right,
I'm all,
right.
I'm all about gut feeling, man. Within 5 minutes, you should at least have some kind of gut feeling about something or someone. You may learn something different down the road, right? But it's that gut feeling. To me, trust your gut because it's right more than it's not. You know, accountability. Something you talked about through those shared dashboards and those real time response metrics. What is that? Like tell people like what's that about?
Well, when you talk about government, there's a distrust in especially how money is spent. And then when you see, a federal shutdown or how we evaded a state shutdown, these are services that people every day count on. And so I look at it as the higher you go, the greater the accountability. And when you look at state government and you have, people that are every day working hard to pay state income tax, to go in to fund a budget, and they're paying dues and revenues, all of that has to be open for people to know logically this is where your money is being spent effectively and efficiently. So I know in Lansing there's an issue of about FOIAs and exemptions. FOIAs, if it's not exempted for a reason of either confidentiality or active investigation, my whole career has been to be unclear is to be unkind. Give the information. FOIA should not be used as a weapon. We see that also. I understand that, but also things that people can't get a grasp on the process. I've said before, I think MEDC has a great advantage of promoting economic development throughout the state of Michigan. But I personally, as a detective, did a case before it was called MEDC, where millions of dollars were exploited and taken from MEDC with back then what it was called different, but it was never, there was no accountability. And I'm thinking, how does this happen? If this is the biggest engine that drives economy and you have active investigations through the attorney general's office against people who are given money, that's the people's money, or you have people that were given money but didn't follow through with what they said they were going to do, that's the people's money. Give it back and let's have an accountability. And not only that, a system in place, because you don't want to take away from the businesses and ideas that are really legitimate and that can do a great job. It's all about business and it's about relationships and doing it the right way. That's where the transparency comes in. And you need somebody at the top saying, we're going to make sure that everybody has the answers. If we don't know now, we're going to get them to you, or we're going to give you a reason why we can't tell you.
Heck yeah, no, and that's the MADC, that's been a lot of talk about recently, right? Like, they were a lot of that funding was wanting to be it's been in jeopardy, right? And I'm all for that, right? Because sometimes certain things need that boost to get going. Where I kind of agree with a lot of people is okay, you got X corporation that just turned out $5 billion in profit last year. No problem if we think, hey, X amount of tax credits will help them build that factory. But where I think to me, a lot of voters question is, well, sometimes when something doesn't work out, it feels like their $100 million got swiped from them.
Right. And let me add to it too. Tax credits that are for the advancement of the industry where the local, county, state are all in line without taking away from state healthcare and education. You don't want to take from the people to fund corporations. There's a way to do that both. And at the same time, now you have what I call a ecosystem where there's stability. You know, we talked off camera about, my business background. I bought my pony at 9 years old named Molly cash because I sold gum and golf balls and collected pop bottles and beer bottles. And I had it for 18 years. I've always been business hustle. My wife and I have businesses. That's the state's job is, to run this on the judicial side for the protection of people's rights, the legislative side on passing laws, but a governor is the executive administrator of the state to enforce laws, maintain order. And so a governor that's able to have a mind and a background of business to make sure that those processes are in place, that's how you have stability. Otherwise, you're competing with 49 other states, or you're coming up with a great idea where this group wasn't included at the origination of the idea. They weren't at the table. You didn't get their perspectives. And now you're fighting from within and nobody wins. You lose big projects. And when you're trying to increase the economy of a state, then that's more than just big businesses. It's supporting the businesses that are here, the Department of Innovation. It's reducing costs, looking at revenue sharing, looking at the things that local municipalities need to thrive. All those are on the table to say what makes the most sense.
Right. No, and that makes a total sense. That kind of feeds into, your Ignite model, and that's earned a lot of national attention. I believe was it Michigan spends over $2 billion annually on corrections.
2.2 billion for 32 prisons. And Joe, I'm going to tell you, this is going to be a shocking stat. 9 out of 10 people in jails in Michigan go back to the streets. Only 10% go to prison. And so all of this county jails in the state of Michigan, not every county has a jail, but 80 of them, all of those inmates that are there, only 1 out of 10 is going to prison. 9 out of 10 are going back to your neighborhoods. So how would you want the sheriffs to return your people to your neighborhoods? I can tell you, Ignite has been that answer. And I'd love to share the concept, because when I say this one word, people are going to know that's different. And that's what makes it so successful. You ready for this? Cool. Since 1836, Genesee County's done the same thing. And so when I saw this going on to the third generation of people coming into jail, knowing that in the Engler administration, they obliterated mental health hospitals, jails became mental health institutions. There's not a sheriff in the state that will argue with that. When you have people coming into the jail, 9 out of 10 of them are addicted or co-addicted. 6 out of 10 have a diagnosed or undiagnosed mental illness, and half of them cannot read a menu. So how do you expect a community to reduce crime, to reduce the money we spend on incarceration without fixing the source of where it comes from? That's where Ignite happens. Inmate growth naturally and intensely through education. We launched it September 8, 2020. And what we did is we changed the philosophy, the culture from incarceration to education. We didn't have any infrastructure. I teamed up with our vendors to do Wi-Fi and Chromebooks and tablets, and we launched an education model for every inmate: GED, diploma, barber college, financial fitness, hospitality, social work. We had online courses, we had virtual reality, and fast forward, we teamed up with all of our trades, the UAW. We're graduating welders that are going into the apprentice program. We're graduating people that have mechanical abilities to go right into the manufacturing. So we leave jail to tether right on the line, charging their tether while they're working. That's why we're 100 less than we were the last 2 years. But Ignite also drops jail violence by 90%. It reduces crime by 23%. There's not a government program in my entire career that's reduced recidivism for the entire community by 23%. And it saves the community $7,200 per inmate that's in Ignite. So in Genesee County, I've saved 2 years in a row over $750,000. Now, if there's less people breaking the law and less people going to jail, that means there's less people going to prison. So let's just say this. Let's just say it reduces crime by 23%. And we're able to do that on a higher level. We have 23% less people going to prison. 23% less of 2.2 billion is in the 900 million mark, where we can replace that by building mental health locations, crisis intervention centers. You can reinvest that into industry. Ignite is the answer that everybody's been looking for of how to do it. And how do we educate people different than how we did in the past? Dopamine. We celebrate. I don't write letters to judges. I don't advocate for their cases because there's victims attached. But while they're in jail, if I can change the way they think and let them leave with a pathway never to come back, we do that by giving them something constructive to place in a space where it has been destructive their whole career. There's people who grew up child abuse, sexual abuse, drug abuse. Well, if you're in that cycle, and many people here listening know exactly what that means, unless you break the cycle and replace it with something positive, it's going to continue. Ignite, whether it's an 8-hour course, here's a bag of chips. Whether it's a 4-week course, you can visit with your family. Or like we're going to have in next week, another graduation commencement where we bring in graduates and you see caps and gowns. That's why Ignite has been trademarked, studied by Brown, Harvard, and Michigan. It's been not only just published, but published in the Economic Journal. And now it's been copied in 13 states, almost 50 sites. It is the national standard of jails in America. And it's the answer that people waiting for started right here in Genesee County. And we're going statewide. Watch what happens.
Heck yeah. No, that's, with addiction. I lost, my older brother, passed away from fentanyl. and he had gotten he had gotten some marijuana from someone who had it was laced.
Laced.
And,
Yep.
because when they did the tox screen drug test on him, whatever, they had found he only had some beer in his stomach and a little bit of that. There was really nothing else in his system. So they were like, we don't know for sure, but this is what it looks like. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. But it's just, so that's something that like I look at, because I'm like, I've been there, I've seen it,
Yeah. See,
I know what it's like, and I feel for people.
can I tell you this? What you just said is exactly why I end many of my comments on Ignite and breaking the fentanyl/opiate drug addiction is it may not be a big deal until it's your family.
Yes.
Then it's a
Yeah,
big deal.
yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, once you're in that position, you just, obviously you see a little bit more, but like the average person may not, and if you're somebody that hasn't been with it and then you all of a sudden have to deal with it, it's I want to say sobering, but you're kind of going, hey, how do I process this, right? How do you process it? It's hard for anybody to, and mental health, like I've said a lot of times, I don't necessarily have the solution to gun violence, right? But what I say is a lot of the times, like Oxford, it's mental health. This kid, obviously, based on what I've seen, had a lot of problems long before that happened. And
Right. You see,
somehow he slipped
tell
through
the
the
story
cracks.
what happened here in Genesee County on the 28th of September at the LDS church that had a
Yes.
shooter with 8 serious, 1 critical, and 4 dead. You are spot on. And when you have people that are in crisis, and you have the ability for people to recognize and have a diversion, and you can separate crisis from weapons, you save innocent lives, not political lives, innocent lives at churches, in schools, in businesses. That's the demand that we need from all of our leaders to focus on mental health, because if we can prevent it, that is the best way to reduce crime.
Yeah, no, it is. And gosh, mental health to me is like almost like it's like you got healthcare, violence, mental health. It's all like they're almost all interlinked and on the same level. Because if you address the mental health crisis, you take care of the rest almost.
Tell you, I try to destigmatize mental illness like being physically sick. We have no problem telling people, I just don't feel well. I have a sinus infection. We go get, an antibiotic, or we go and rest until the flu passes. But when it comes to this being ill, there's still a stigma, and there's limited resources, and it doesn't get better. It just doesn't go away on its own many times. And so that's why I see the aftermath. I see the end result of mental illness or addiction. And what comes first? The key is that as a state, we need to be serious and have a plan. That's why seven districts of mental health treatment with crisis intervention teams, crisis response teams. Most of these individuals, addicts or anybody in crisis, 36 to 72 hours and everything's changed. You've got them detoxed, you've got a pathway, you've got them on medications, and now you actually have a plan of long-term success. What you're living through is many times the gaps that other families feel all too personal.
But yeah, and I took it as a passion of mine not to let my son in. Not everybody has that ability or that, that structure to where they can do it. uh you know let's as we get towards the end, let's kind of talk a quick second about the economy, right? You've talked a lot about apprenticeships, especially in like EV and clean energy and tax credits. I know one of your things is 20,000 new skilled trade jobs and placements. We talked a little bit about your programs earlier, but how do we get that like on like a statewide level, right? Like, how do we make sure this is reaching not just the urban kids, but the rural kids too, who urban kids have an economic disadvantage, but a lot of rural kids have an access to certain types of technology disadvantage. Like, so how do you make that happen?
Anytime you're going to ask me about an issue, I'm always going to go back to the people, because that's where the power is. We got to build the
Yeah.
economy, increase the amount of people that are here at the state. How do you do that? Increase
Yes.
the state that people want to be,
Yes.
increase a state that people want to stay. How do you keep them in our colleges and our universities? Is you create an ecosystem where there's no incentive for them to leave. When you have a system like you're talking about, K through 12, I'm going to add one little caveat. I have a perspective K through jail. So when we level the playing field and give everybody the opportunity to succeed, and we have a playbook and a curriculum that backs down technical skills into the middle school area, sixth, seventh, and eighth. Why are we not recommending and introducing these kids to welding and electrician and data recovery and digital technology, financial literacy? In those formidable years, when they get to ninth and 10th grade, now they're in their apprentice program. They're learning how to be a welder. They're learning how to do skilled trades. In 11th and 12th grade, they're actually
Yes.
doing co-ops. By the time they graduate, we're sending men and women to battle. We can certainly send them into the job field as a trained and an experienced skilled tradesperson. So backing CTE all the way down to the middle school, it makes sense to me, because now you've created an ecosystem. When industry does come in, they want to build or they want a supply of individuals. We can say, as a state, we've got an infrastructure that we have long game planned, and we have the people to get done what your industry needs to get done. But this is another long-term plan. We can't wait till tomorrow. We can't wait. It's got to start right now. So balancing the field, giving people the opportunity, technology allows that. But the governor has the ability to say, don't forget about those kids in Lake County or Sheboygan or in St. Clair. Don't forget the kids in Muskegon or over in Houghton. These are the individuals that have the same talent as everybody else. May not the concentration, but there's talent from the entire state. That's how you solve. That's how you create an ecosystem of economy, by increasing the goods and services from 555 billion, 1 or 2%. And if that's the case, now you're less tax on the individuals that are paying state income tax. You can reduce revenues. If we can save everybody a couple, $200-300 a month by doing that, I'm going to make your life better because we don't need to pay as much.
Right. No, that's perfect. A lot of talked about human trafficking in Michigan, right? We're, I believe, a top 10 state in human trafficking. And from, I guess, an ignorance point of view, right? I would assume that's because we're a border state with another country, and that kind of opens up a lot of holes. You've talked about that a little bit before in some of your stuff. Like, how do we address that? From your perspective.
What I would encourage everybody to go and Google search Ghost. It's now the Global Human Oppression Strike Team. It started in May of 2018 as the Genesis Human Oppression Strike Team. Ghost was because of some international experience that I had undercover working in Mexico and in Haiti. We brought it back here when I was the undersheriff, and I said, we are done responding to crisis by a 911 call. We're going to be proactive. So Ghost is a proactive team that puts ads out. At the time we did it in 2018, it was web-based. Now it's app-based. And we find sex traffickers and predators and pedophiles. And we, as law enforcement, create a system where they come to us to have sex with a 13, 14, or 15-year-old. And we have people that are vulnerable beyond that. Human trafficking, I want to make it clear to everybody listening, is the movement of people for sex or labor. That was what it is, for money. And it is real wherever you're listening. If you have a hotel, a car lot, an internet in any community, human trafficking is there. Ghost has been the name brand of fighting against that evil. And since we started in 2018, I've worked with 64 sheriffs throughout the state of Michigan doing ghost operations with those sheriffs. I've also been able to work with 9 states. Ghost certification, which is a civilian ability for people to know what to look out for to protect their kids from sextortion, which is another whole topic. But also we train other law enforcement. And since we started in 2018, we arrested over 270 predators and have never lost a case because we do it the right way. We don't entrap. We do it in a way to make sure that these predators that we're finding are knocking on the door and it's law enforcement behind the door, not a real 13, 14-year-old trafficked child. You are correct. We are a state because we're a big state. We've got a lot of borders. We got a lot of opportunities, but there's another example at the state level. This is going to be a state that any predator, any sextortionist wants to come in here, either by physical or digital means, they're going to be met with Batman, and it's called Ghost. And it's going to be the governor's human oppression strike team. And we're going to be the most aggressive of not only combating, abolishing human trafficking, and holding people accountable. That's what I can promise you, because we've already done in Genesee County, and people respect Ghost. We do it the right way, and now we're taking it statewide to protect your kids and the most vulnerable.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure you've gathered by some of what I've talked about. I'm big on states taking the charge, because guys like you, our leaders here, they're the ones who can fix our problems here in the state. So kudos on that. So let's do a quick five question, like, lightning round quick thing, right? So we kind of talked a little about the human trafficking, right? So we are. So is it fact or fiction? We are a top 10 state from your knowledge.
We are a state that has more than its share of human trafficking, yes. And it's depending on what you listen to and what numerical value it is, one is too much. But there's a reason why I've been in 64 counties throughout the state, and other sheriffs like Sheriff Zybert, Sheriff Goodenough from Monroe, from Marquette down to Monroe, have their own teams. Yes, we are in this state a high value target for predators and pedophiles.
Okay, no, perfect. I mean, that's what people need to hear. Ignite jail education model. Has it truly been adopted in 20 counties in the state?
Not in the state. Kalamazoo County has it. Well, Washtenaw County is launching within the next 30 days. St. Joe County is launching Ignite. But there are states throughout the nation that have been with Ignite, from the first one being Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. You have Hennepin County in Minnesota, which was Minnesota, and right there, Minneapolis. You've got Collin County, Texas, just north Dallas, Fort Worth. You've got North Dakota, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio. These are sites, Republican and Democratic sheriffs, white, black sheriffs, male, female. Ignite is the answer. It's adopted by the National Sheriff Association. They have a whole board. I'm not even on the board. Ignite has taken
Man,
flight. It is the answer.
okay. Before law enforcement, you trained as a fitness instructor and motivational speaker.
Well, I don't live in a van down by the river. I can promise you that. But I am by nature a motivator, but I would like to think of myself more of an inspiration to people. I breathe life back into folks. I can't, motivation is continuing to push somebody. I want to breathe life into people where today they woke up hopeless. Tonight they go into bed with hope. And so I think part of that mind, body, and spirit, I'm a 5-time Ironman finisher. I train all the time. I want to set the example. I choose to be positive. I mean, I've been in Flint law enforcement for 33 years. I've seen a lot of death and violence. I've done a lot of difficult work. I've told moms that their sons are gone and dads that their wives are gone. I feel that anytime anybody in public service knows, where you police, fire, EMS, or in ER medicine, when you're doing those things, it takes a chunk of flesh out of you. I could easily be miserable and pessimistic. I choose to be this way because I think that becomes a force multiplier, and others can get hope from that. That's what I am.
Hey, no, perfect. You once dressed up as Santa to deliver toys to kids during the holidays in Flint. Now, this is a rumor, and nobody's told this. This is speculation. Did you really truly grow a beard?
No, the Santa thing is not accurate. And
Okay.
I've never had a beard. I've had a shadow, but never a beard. My beard wouldn't look good on me. But yes, I want you to know that the second Saturday of December, in this case, it's December 13th. This will be our 6th holiday spectacular, an aftermath of the George Floyd, where we go into the communities all over Genesee County, and I take donations, but we make boxes of consumable goods, $200 to $300 worth, and we go to different places. Adam told you about this before. And these folks either have needs, or maybe they just are special people. They lost somebody. And we bring law enforcement communities together in other communities. We say, hey, you're just being loved on today. You go give to someone else. It's a mad success. We've got so many partners. It's now in multiple states throughout the country. And the second Saturday of December, just this year, became National Unity Day. And we coined it here from Genesee County. It's just a day for you to go be kind to somebody, a random act of kindness, and watch what happens here, Joe. One good act goes into another, and it will neutralize those bad acts. I'm believing it.
Hey, you know what? That's something that we want to participate here on this show. So,
Right.
I'm definitely going to email your people over. We want to get involved in that as well.
You should come.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I know time's winding down, so I really appreciate you coming on. Chris, that has been, the Protect, Serve, and Unify. I mean, I can't stress to people enough, and especially to you, keep doing that. I tell people all the time, like I even told Adam, keep that stuff up because it's what we need. To me, it's what the leaders of over the history of our country would want. Especially the ones that aren't around. I love or hate Ronald Reagan. That man won 49 of 50 states in his second term for a reason, because people believed in a message. Hindsight's always 2020, but at that time, people believed in a message, right? And that's your message. I think can really catch on fire with anything with unity. This show, and especially me as a person, are all about, because I have taken so much flack before from being about unity, and I'm like, okay, no problem,
You're not alone.
so No, but everybody, I really appreciate it. Check out Chris Swanson for governor. Chris, what's your website again so everybody can find it?
Swanson from Michigan.
Yeah, everybody check it out. And all the links are going to be in our episodes, and sign up for our newsletter. We usually send out one a week. Sometimes, if there's a crazy issue, we send out a special edition. Because remember, here, we're not left, we're not right, we're forward only. I'm Joe, and this is the Middle Ground Mic. See everybody next time.